We begin with a Fox News alert. President Trump just signed a new travel ban executive order. The new details just laid out by his Secretary of State, Homeland Security Chief, and Attorney General. Iraq is no longer on the list of countries from which citizens are banned from coming into the United States for 90 days. 6 nations remain on the list: Iran, Libya, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. And there were several other changes the White House is hoping will stand up to any legal challenges. We'll have much more on this as the hour rolls on. And this Fox News alert as well. Major fallout after this weekend's stunning claim President Trump accused his predecessor of ordering a wiretap on his phones during the presidential campaign. The White House is now calling for Congress to investigate it. This as the Democrats are demanding proof and reports of pushback against the allegations from the head of the FBI. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business Kennedy. And look at this. Today's #OneLuckyGuy. The chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Jason Chaffetz. The news is breaking. We are glad he is here. He is outnumbered, though. Hi.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
You ready?
Oh, yeah. Fired up. Let's go.
Does it ever slow down in Washington anymore?
No. Are you kidding? President's up at like 3:45 in the morning, so look out, America. I mean, you always got to pay attention, so it's good.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to it.
Yeah.
We'll start with this. Key members of Congress are saying they'll honor President Trump's request to investigate his claim that President Obama had phones in Trump Tower tapped during the presidential campaign. This after Mr. Trump leveled the accusations in a series of tweets beginning on Saturday morning, culminating in, quote, "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon Watergate. Bad or sick guy." Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, says the president believes that the people have the right to know.
Let's get to the bottom of it. That is the president's entire point. You have various incredible news sources showing that there was politically motivated activity all during the campaign and suggesting that there may be more there. So let's have the House and Senate Intelligence Committees do their work and think about whether to include this, but the president has made clear that he would like there to be an investigation of any possible abuses, and that hopefully that oversight activity will clarify for everyone.
But a furious denial from former Obama press secretary Josh Earnest, who says a president has no authority to issue a wiretap.
What I can categorically deny, Martha, is that the White House was at all involved in directing or interfering or influencing an FBI investigation of any
That's not
sort.
what I'm asking.
The president was not giving marching orders to the FBI about how to conduct their investigations. He was not asking for regular updates on FBI investigations. And let me just stipulate one more time. You have to ask the FBI whether there actually is an investigation into Mr. Trump, his associates, his campaign. That's for them to talk about.
And speaking of the FBI, Director James Comey reportedly wants the Justice Department to publicly deny the allegations, call the president wrong, setting up a possible collision course between that agency and the White House. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts, always busy, especially these days. Good to see you.
And Harris, good afternoon to you. Good to have Congressman Chaffetz with you there today, because they'll be able to answer a lot of questions regarding this. But let's just take a look at this whole thing. I mean, clearly this was an attempt by the president to change the subject. Going back to earlier in the week, he was having a terrific week after his address to a joint session of Congress. Then that all got blown up with the allegations about Sessions lying to Congress about having contacts with the Russians. The president left here on Friday afternoon going to Florida, or Friday morning going to Florida. He was said to be furious, so he got up on Saturday morning and tweeted that the former President Obama was wiretapping him in the closing weeks of the campaign. Now, there's no hard evidence to prove that that was happening, but what the White House has done, very shrewd strategic political strategy here, is that they're forcing the Democrats to prove a negative. And in doing so, they're leaving plenty of room for Americans to parse what's being said about it. You saw what Josh Earnest said there. Listen to what James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, said yesterday here.
For the part of the national security apparatus that I oversaw as DNI, there was no such wiretap activity mounted against the president-elect at the time, or as a candidate, or against his campaign.
There is no FISA court order?
Not to my knowledge.
Of anything at Trump Tower?
No.
So you saw what he said there. Not to my knowledge. I don't think I wasn't aware of there being a FISA court order, but it's not to say that maybe somebody else did it. And that's what's going on here. As you look at what's happening in the language, and then the fact that you've got allegedly you've got communications intercepts of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn when he was talking to Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the United States. You allegedly got transcripts of wiretaps that included Paul Manafort. Enough evidence there for people to say, well, maybe it could have happened. Listen to what Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas said yesterday.
I've seen no evidence of the allegations we've seen in the media, Chris, whether that's a potential FISA court application or a denial of that application or a resubmission of an application or surveillance for that matter. That doesn't mean that none of these things happened. It simply means I haven't seen that yet.
There you go. I haven't seen any evidence, but it doesn't mean that none of these things happened. Democrats, though, on the other hand, are spinning this as bad for the president either way. Listen here to Chuck Schumer.
If he falsely spread this kind of misinformation, that is so wrong. It's beneath the dignity of the presidency. If it's true, it's even worse for the president, because that means that a federal judge, independently elected, has found probable cause that the president or people on his staff have had probable cause to have broken the law or to have interacted with a foreign agent.
And now the White House is saying, all right, well, let's let the intelligence committees in Congress sort all of this out, which is 180 degrees opposite of what the White House was saying last week, where they said there's no there's none of these Russian allegations have been proven to be true. We've been told by the FBI and the CIA that there's nothing there. So now they want Congress to investigate. What a difference a couple of days makes, Harris.
What do you mean overnight? Fox report last night, the Comey stuff was breaking. Look at today.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Crazy. Thanks.
Thank you, John. So, Congressman, I want to start with where we are today with the president and the evidence and what he needs to show and what the FBI is doing.
Well, look, Devin Nunes, who's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, will lead out on this. The Oversight Committee will play a supportive role. There are certain things that our committee can do that intelligence can't necessarily do, but they're going to have the lead on this, and then I think they're going to get to the bottom of this. Devin Nunes, for more than a year, has been highlighting the fact that Russia is a problem. They continually involve themselves in espionage and those types of things. Now you have this other side of the equation where they're saying, all right, maybe the president was involved in something nefarious. That whole spectrum of things, the House Intelligence Committee is going to lead out on. All
right. Well, there's always a paper trail when you talk about getting an order that lets you wiretap, right? So there are two different perspectives on whether or not that existed. Because I want to show you the former AG Mukasey. He says that paperwork did exist. Watch.
This is the difference between being correct and being right. I think the president was not correct, certainly, in saying that President Obama ordered a tap on a server in Trump Tower. I think he's right in that there was surveillance and that it was conducted at the behest of the attorney of the Justice Department through the FISA court.
So a slew of semantics, a difference in facts. What's going on?
Well, it's going to take some time to unravel this. It really is. But there would be a clear paper trail if it was done legally and lawfully through the FISA court. That should be pretty easy and shouldn't take a lot of time to actually untangle that. If it was done a little bit more surreptitiously, we've had things that have happened in the Obama administration that have led one to believe that maybe they don't always go through the legal, lawful way. I mean, we had a series of these things, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way the Obama administration did act.
So in the middle of this, like nougat in a candy bar, is FBI Director James Comey, who has more than once found himself politically doing some gymnastics. So what do you make of the fact that he's calling on the DOJ, right, to say that the president was wrong and that there is no evidence? Why can't he ask the questions himself? Why can't he step up himself?
Well, why the rush to that conclusion? And I think the mistake that the president made was using the term wiretapping because it allows,
what should he have said?
It allows Democrats to just focus on that one word. And I think that's where we're misplacing the energy, because the government can, without warrants rather, and in secret, spy on pretty much everyone at any time through a number of means, including the FBI has the power to read essentially every email by accessing the cloud.
Yeah.
And there have been a number of whistleblowers over the years who've said that these programs are encroaching on our civil liberties. And I think if the president feels that his privacy and that of some of his surrogates and people who worked on the campaign, if that was compromised, he should come out against this kind of government mass surveillance. I think that's the right thing for him to do. And I think we have to ask more and not get caught up simply on the wiretapping, but how is the government spying? How is it being misused? And how can we fix the problem?
But as John Roberts so eloquently pointed out at the top of his report, this was a very artful way of distracting from what was the Jeff Sessions problem for this administration. It did distract from that, coming out with these bold accusations of wiretapping, and it also distracted from Republicans like yourself, Congressman, who were calling very early on. You were one of the first high-ranking Republicans to call for Jeff Sessions to recuse himself without any actual evidence of him.
Isn't somebody curious as to why 24 hours after Donald Trump probably has his best moment with the joint session of Congress, 24 hours later, you have both the Washington Post and the New York Times out there with big stories about, I mean, the timing to me just really doesn't quite smell quite right. Nevertheless, when I heard him, when the Attorney General himself said that he would recuse, I thought, you know what, that is the right thing. If it was appropriate, I thought that is the right answer. If it's about the campaign and he was actively involved in the campaign, he probably should step back. And so he did the two things that I at least put out on a tweet and said he should clarify, which he has. And the number two thing is he should probably recuse himself if it's appropriate.
I want to get back to wiretapping. What Kennedy said really had me scratching my head, because what you're talking about is more than semantics. It's the actual legal term for things. And Megan, what I love sometimes that you will do is drill this down to where the American people really care. Where are we on that?
I mean, I came in today and I could not stop myself from talking to you. I was like, Harris, we have to break this down before I go on the show. My own personal focus group of friends, the American public are really confused on both sides, on the left and the right. If this is as serious as Watergate, which the president himself said it possibly could be, I would have had him preferred to have him come on television, do a sit-down interview with someone, just maybe do a straight-to-camera, whatever, saying it's an extremely serious issue. I, Meghan McCain, have reason to believe that, yeah, President Obama, I wouldn't put this past him. Look what they did to the Tea Party groups, IRS specifically targeting Tea Party groups. There's a whole litany of reasons why the American public could come to the conclusion that this is feasible and possible. But the way it was executed in a tweet, followed up a half hour later about a tweet about The Apprentice's ratings, that makes me take it less seriously. And as I have said all along, the political execution in their communications department and his Twitter account, I consider his communications department, they are losing this battle right now. Because again, when people are confused on the messaging on both sides, you haven't done it successfully.
Or when they're talking about the things that are not Obamacare, or not the immigration travel ban, second part or take two on an executive order, when they're not talking about those things that affect millions and millions of people, then the messaging is defunct.
Okay,
but maybe not.
To your point, though, and Sandra, you touched on this a little bit, the distraction seems to be from the Sessions news. I actually think it's from something else. I actually think that it's a distraction from Obamacare, because there's a lot of strife within the Republican Party and between the House and Senate as to what exactly we're going to do. And this takes some of the focus away from that schism.
So there's a lot going on. You saw Senator Chuck Schumer say that this is a prime opportunity for Democrats to take advantage of the fact that Republicans are not in agreement on what's happening with Obamacare. I guess that means we'll see a bill or something from them, and that they'll come to the table unlike Inauguration Day?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they've Mr. Schumer, I'm sure, will be first to market to be there to try to lend a helpful hand. That's what he's always doing. Look, I think the replacement for Obamacare is like hours away from being introduced. That we're that close, and then there'll be a vigorous debate, and there should be. Unlike how the Democrats did it, where they just force-fed it through the Congress Nancy Pelosi's way. So
one thing Senator Rand Paul, and we'll get more into Obamacare, said last night is that you know what, you don't want to look like the people that you just criticized, and you're starting to look like the people you just criticized. That's his concern. But again, that's coming up. But we're not talking about that yet, because we've got still this thing with the wiretapping, supposedly.
We're going to have to walk and chew gum, too, so there's a lot to do.
Wow, I love gum. President Trump is signing his revised travel ban executive order today. That's where we started the hour. The changes to the ban and whether it will be able to make it through the courts this time.
Fox
Fox News alert President Trump today signing a revised travel ban executive order. The ban temporarily blocks citizens from 6 countries from coming into the United States: Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, and Libya. It excludes legal permanent residents and moves Iraq off the 90-day visa ban, but provides enhanced screening for some people. There is no longer an indefinite ban for Syrian refugees, and anyone who had a valid visa before the first executive order was issued is okay to come into the country now. It goes into effect March 16th. Just a short time ago, Secretaries Tillerson and Kelly, along with Attorney General Sessions, announced the revised order, emphasizing it's about keeping America safe.
To our allies and partners around the world, please understand this order is part of our ongoing efforts to eliminate vulnerabilities that radical Islamist terrorists can and will exploit for destructive ends.
All right, so it's out there. We know the details. How do you feel about it?
Yay! All right. No, I think the rollout's a lot better. You got 3 cabinet secretaries out there pushing it. It's 10 days until it actually gets implemented, but it's absolutely the right public policy. You cannot vet somebody coming out of Libya and have confidence that you can put them into a neighborhood in Nebraska or Iowa or Utah or California and say, you know what, we know because we've done the research that this person has a high degree of probability of not, causing a disruption. And that is the right thing to do. It's exactly what the president said he was going to do.
But what about the legal challenges involved?
There'll be all kinds of legal challenges, but I believe that the president has the right, has the authority, and has the duty to actually make sure that we're vetting people properly before they come to the United States of America. That's
all right. Well, the new EO is out, and as you just mentioned, Tillerson was up there, Sessions was present, Kelly was present. 10 days to roll. Is this going to look and feel different?
Yeah, it definitely has a different perceptual feel than the first one, because the first one felt hasty and somewhat arbitrary and I think too broad, and it gave way too much ammunition to the left, which was in full protest mode still. And I know that you've had some problems at some of these town halls, and it's an addictive chemical they put in that protest ether. People become so agitated by it, so they were just looking for that, and I think this gives them more legal protection. But you do worry that there are only 6 countries on the list. I mean, I don't worry about that. I don't want it to be too totalitarian, but it can be arbitrary because you can have people in Western Europe that we assume have been properly vetted if they've landed in places like Belgium and France, but
right.
Maybe perhaps they have not, and we don't know if we have a proper vetting system.
But still, only time will tell. If I may be cliche for a moment, Megan, I mean, how does this go the next 10 days?
I think a lot of people who have been critics of President Trump should be optimistic. This shows that he has learned the lessons of the original executive order rollout, which didn't go as smoothly as everyone would like. Me specifically, I like that we have taken out the moral equivalency between Iran and Iraq, given that we have troops still present and fighting in Iraq, and obviously everyone saw what happened with our Iraqi translators, so that's completely off the table. Optically, they don't have the latitude to mess this up this time, and right now I think it looks like, all cylinders are go.
Wow, everybody's so happy, so I'm going to be the outnumbered one because I still have a lot of questions. So there has been some reporting and some fact-checking on how many people have come from those areas, these now 6 countries who are suspected of radicalization or terrorism. So there's some evidence, maybe slight, of some of that. There's a whole lot more that they've come from places like Saudi Arabia, and I know how complicated our political relationship is with them versus these other countries and how big their voice is. We had a lot of people get on planes and other vehicles to come here to kill us. Why isn't Saudi Arabia even hinted at as being on this list?
Look, you can look at Saudi Arabia, you can also look at Pakistan.
Okay, let's look at them. Why are they not on this list?
Well, again, I still think they're going to, the mechanism, though, to do that vetting in those countries is stronger than, say, it is in Libya.
You feel good about that after 9/11? Trust them?
Nobody feels good about that and what happened in 9/11. Of course not. But they have a very difficult job to go out and vet all of these people. But to highlight these 6 countries, which were highlighted in the Obama administration, is problematic too. You're making the case to expand it and to do it even
but not
broader.
Arbitrarily.
No.
To look at it based on the criteria that have been listed by the president.
Well, and you got to look at something like 300 people that have come in as refugees that are supposedly being looked at by the Department of Justice. So it's a very difficult job, but I think the rollout and what they're doing here and these 6 countries.
It's different,
but I think you ask a very valid question about Saudi Arabia, and also I would add on to that Pakistan.
All right, we'll leave it there. Meanwhile, the mainstream media reacting with alarm to President Trump's claims the previous administration spied on his campaign, treating the idea as absurd. But is it really? And Attorney General Jeff Sessions submitting amended testimony today about his contacts with Russia's ambassador. But Democrats want him to testify in person. And after the show, of course, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. And of course, you can tweet us as well. We will see you there.
Growing questions about how the mainstream media is covering President Trump's accusations that the Obama administration tapped his phones during the campaign. Watch how ABC's Martha Raddatz handled an interview on This Week with Deputy White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
All we're saying is let's take a closer look. Let's look into this. If this happened, if this is accurate, this is the biggest overreach and the biggest scandal.
Look into this. The President of the United States is accusing the former president of wiretapping him.
I think that this is, again, something that if this happened, Martha,
if.
And take a look at these headlines. One from CNN reading, quote, Trump falsely accuses Obama of wiretapping him. And the cover of the New York Daily News over the weekend declaring Mr. Trump nuts and including a subheader that reads, the news says evidence-free charge is a mark of instability. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Congressman, I'll start with you. I watched that interview with Martha Raddatz and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Thought Sarah Huckabee really composed herself, was trying to explain the perspective of the White House. When I see Martha Raddatz, I just think of her crying on election night because Trump won.
Yeah, I can't necessarily get to the motive of everybody, but it is a very serious allegation. We're going to take it very seriously in Congress. Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has been looking into Russia for more than a year. But now we'll expand that to look at what's going on with this allegation of wiretapping. There are a variety of different ways that could have happened, and it's going to take some time to do that, and he'll continue to lead out on it.
When you see some of these headlines, though, that are so over the top and so dramatic, it has to anger you. It angers me, and I, have not always been the biggest fan of President Trump.
Well, look, they're so duplicitous in the media. On the one hand, the Democrats they want it their way and only their way, and their heads are kind of exploding over this issue. But we're going to take it very seriously, and so they don't have much evidence to suggest that Russia was actually conspiring with the Trump campaign, and yet they write that out there as if it was a fact that everybody should just accept. But I don't see much of any evidence that ties together collusion. At the same time, we're skeptical of what Donald Trump has put out there as the president, making this allegation, but we're going to take it seriously and let the facts take us where they go. I don't know what we're going to find, but we're going to go look at it.
Harris, what did you make of those headlines?
Well, they just bring back kind of the basic question that I have had all along. Is this driven by the president's tweets and his early comments that seem to profess, and if you look as far back as like 2010, a liking for Russia and their leader, at least within the context of maybe a pageant or something like that, if you look at older tweets? Does it really revolve around that, or is there in terms of who from the administration would have met with Russian officials? And I know you've got the Jeff Sessions situation. I'm just wondering what's driving the story. Can we just drill down to the facts? Because we really do have some big issues in the country. People elected this president to deal with those issues.
But this goes back to the point of how CNN, a major network in this country, can run a headline, Trump falsely accuses Obama of wiretapping him. As a journalist, it's not their job to come up with a definitive answer that he has falsely made these claims before they've even asked anybody questions.
No, I read a New York Times story that came out yesterday, I think it was, and the source was an American official. It was so broad, right? It wasn't Department of Justice, it wasn't the intelligence community, it was an American official. I mean, you can work at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I guess, and qualify for that. And so these sources, what's disappointing to me is that when you read these articles and you see the sources, they're so anonymous. What happened to journalism where they actually got somebody on the record That's something that's very frustrating.
But what happens if, let's say there is some form of collusion between Trump operatives and Russia? And, we don't know how serious that might or might not be. And also, what happens if President Obama really had ordered that wiretap somehow, nefariously, surreptitiously, who knows, in Trump Tower? What happens to the former president then?
Well, look, we're going to go into this with eyes wide open. My experience now, having been 8+ years on the Oversight Committee and 2+ years as the chairman, you don't know what's around the corner. So we're not going to prejudge this. We're not going to presuppose the conclusion. We'll let the facts take us where it takes us, and we'll see what happens. But the Obama administration's had some nefarious things in their past. The IRS targeted Americans based on their political beliefs.
James Rosen, one of our
James
Fox
Rosen
Channel family.
type of issue. Fast and Furious. We had to hold we had to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. And then look at my own case. I had more than 40 Secret Service agents illegally tap into my background in my records. A violation of federal law, and the Obama administration, the mainstream media, just paid no attention to that. So you have 40 Secret Service agents looking into the chairman of the Oversight Committee who's doing an investigation on the Secret Service, and nothing happened to those people.
Yeah.
So, is it possible that somebody overstepped the line and was peering into...
Maybe if more of those people were on the White House lawn, so many people wouldn't have breached it. But you also have, the former president expanded the powers of surveillance and information sharing among agencies. Lame. All right. Well, Attorney General Jeff Sessions expected to provide amended testimony in writing today regarding his contacts with Russia's ambassador during the presidential election. That may not be enough for the 9 Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee who are demanding Sessions appear again before the committee to clarify his answers. But the Republican chairman, Senator Chuck Grassley, saying that's not going to happen. All this as many on the left continue to push for an independent probe on Russia and possible collusion with the Trump campaign. But former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper says he's not aware of any evidence of a connection. Watch.
We did not include any evidence in our report, and I say our, that's NSA, FBI, CIA, with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report.
I understand that, but does it exist?
Not to my knowledge.
If it existed, it would have been in this report.
This could have unfolded or become available in the time since I left the government.
Now, meantime, the leader of the Senate Democrats, Chuck Schumer, now calling for an immediate investigation by the Department of Justice's Inspector General into whether there has been any political interference with the investigations into Trump's ties to Russia and his campaign's ties. So where do we go from here? At what point does the Attorney General, who's now recused himself, but the Department of Justice, call for an independent investigator?
Well, with no evidence of collusion, there's no need for a special prosecutor. That is ridiculous. And for the Democrats to suddenly have this newfound commitment to openness, transparency, and principle, I mean, what changed?
And
the president changed. Yeah, I just don't see any direct evidence of that. There's some incidental context, but there were with the Democrats as well. So I just don't see.
That doesn't mean this is going to go away. Will Democrats keep pushing this?
Oh, of course they're going to keep pushing this. And look, the Attorney General is going to come to Capitol Hill multiple times to testify, but submitting and writing a clarification is far more than they need to do at this point. We need to get on with the business of the country.
Yeah. So if you thought that having a special prosecutor look at this would make it go away because there's no there, would you agree?
No, I don't think there's need for it. People say, well, let's rely on the statute.
Just to move on.
There is no special prosecutor statute that's even there. They would be appointed by the Attorney General himself. Look, Congress is going to look at it. The Intel Committee has those resources to lead out on it. And I think that's the right avenue to do it. That'll happen in the Senate and in the House.
Can I ask you a quick question? Because you've mentioned him a couple of times, the chair of the House, Intel, Nunes. They were on the Hill simultaneously during and held a news conference during Outnumbered last week. And Adam Schiff on the other side of the political aisle, also a representative from California, they came out of the same Intel meeting. Nunes said there is no evidence. Schiff said we can't talk about it. What? Is there evidence or no evidence? If there's no evidence, move on.
Look, if they had the evidence, the Democrats, I'm sure, would dump it out there for all to see. But here we are, turning the corner into the end of the first week of March.
Yeah.
and they don't have anything there. And if there's something, call our office, give it to us.
Okay, but I have a question for you, Megan, because how do you get over this hyper-politicized environment for people who just want the truth? People just want to figure out what's going on, and they don't necessarily want to have to pick a side in this political football game. How do you do that?
And if we've learned nothing over the last year and a half, there's a complete and utter distrust of all our government agencies and our politicians. I think we can all collectively agree on that. What I need Democrats to do...
You trust me, don't you?
I trust you. There are some people I trust. Of course I trust you. But collectively, this looks politicized. And what I need Democrats to do in regards to Jeff Sessions is, clearly you're implying that he's some kind of Russian mole between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin. So come out and say it. Because if you want to dance, you got to go out and you got to accuse them big time. But, you know, wasting everyone's time saying special committees when you're here saying there's absolutely no need or precedence for it one way or another. If you're going to do this, then you got to pull the plug and actually accuse Jeff Sessions of doing what you're implying, but you won't because it's probably irrational.
Well, and that makes the story go away for the Democrats. And I mean, that's what we're talking about. They don't want this to go away necessarily because politically for them, it's distracting.
But that's what they're implying all over television. And it's just, again...
No, they're absolutely right. They're trying to gin up enough hysteria and distraction for a political win, and that remains to be seen.
Republicans are set to unveil their plan to repeal and replace Obamacare this week. Congressional leaders working with the White House over the weekend to finalize the details. But GOP unity on the bill is anything but solid. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul already calling it, quote, Obamacare light. But when asked if he's worried about some of the sticky issues like the refundable tax credit and the Medicaid expansion rollback, House Speaker Paul Ryan said this.
I'm not really worried at all because we're doing this hand in glove with President Trump, with Tom Price, HHS Secretary, with our counterparts in the Senate. We're all working off the same piece of paper, the same legislation. This is what we have long stood on as conservatives. It is the plan that we ran on in all of 2016 that we said if we get the chance of having a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and this is what we're going to replace it with. Well, guess what? We are keeping that promise.
All right, Speaker Ryan says he's not worried at all. Congressman, are you? Does anything concern you at this point?
Well, look, the status quo, Obamacare as we know it now, is in a death spiral, and people need relief. It is absolutely failing and coming apart at the seams.
Does this solve the problem?
It does. And you know what I like about this? You don't have us coming in saying everybody has to be right here on this. I mean, we all campaigned on it. We do have to ultimately produce a product, and it may not have 100% of what I want in it, but I guarantee it's going to be so much better than what we currently have. There's going to be a process. Unlike what Nancy Pelosi did where she just shoved it down the pike, is what's going to happen is they're going to offer it. It'll go to the committee. There'll be a markup. That may go for days. I don't know how long it's going to last. People will be able to offer amendments, and we're going to have that vigorous debate, and there will be Republicans that disagree. That's the beautiful thing about how this process is supposed to work. So we're doing it the way it's supposed to be done.
So how do you account for Senator Rand Paul, who says that it's absolutely not being done the way it's supposed to be done? He's in the Senate, of course, not the House, but he went to House Room 157 and couldn't see the bill, but it was leaked, according to him, to the media, and so he got some eyes on it. What do you say to him?
Well, look, he's offered a plan that I really
the
like.
Obamacare replacement plan.
Really, I do like it. There's a lot to like about his plan, but focus on the Senate because it's hard to
That's
argue.
What you would say to him?
Yeah, focus on the Senate. We're going to go first. We're going to go through it, do it in the House, and he can weigh in with his opinion. It's always welcome. But look, this week is when you actually get to see it, and we'll all get to poke at it and read it and debate it and talk about it and hopefully get through it.
But how do you square that circle if you've got a big disagreement about the individual mandate, the Cadillac tax, and just renaming it something else, pre-existing conditions, and also keeping people on their parents' plan until they're 26 years old, until they're well into their third decade of life?
But that's actually per military. That's exactly how it was as a military dependent. So that actually is mirroring that.
One of the concepts you'll hear is what we call the healthcare backpack. Okay, put into the backpack what you want, what you need, and be able to take it where you're going to go and where you need to.
There's too much in the backpack already, though. It's full of Obamacare rocks, and I worry that...
That's why you get to choose what you want.
Megan, I want you to get in on this.
Yes.
No, I actually read this morning by Chris Jacobs, and he said this better than I could. What's more that the framework is described looks for all intents and purposes like a legislative orphan, appealing to no one, neither moderates nor conservatives within the Republican Party. That's the problem, I think, going forward, is if you're not pleasing one side or the other, you're going to have a political dogfight. And if you think Rand Paul is going to give this up, you weren't start following him on Twitter last week.
He's not, because what he says will happen in the next week or so is that you can all agree on repeal. It's the replacement part that hasn't come. And so we've already gone beyond one enrollment period. My question to him last night was, well, what do you do with that money that people have already paid in as their mandate fee? Does the IRS give a credit?
With the congressman on the couch, last word to you, will the GOP get this done?
Yes.